And now we move on, and tomorrow in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a revolutionary new car will be unveiled which could put Britain at the forefront of a new age of pollution-free measuring. The car runs on hydrogen, and all that comes out of its exhaust is steam. Its millionaire creator, Dr. Roger Billings, has a remarkable pedigree, having already invented the first personal computer and the double-sided floppy disk. Now, after 25 years, he's perfected a safe way to use hydrogen to drive a car capable of doing 80 miles an hour. And he's picked Britain as the base from which to develop the commercial potential of his invention, a car which, as David Cost reports, is by coincidence the subject of the latest novel by the comedian Ben Elton.
This will change everything. I've invented an engine that runs on hydrogen, insisted Geoffrey. An engine which runs on hydrogen is an engine that does not run on oil. It could change the world. It costs nothing to run. It's environmentally harmless. Yeah, then it turns into a pizza and you can eat it, said Deborah.
And as you can see, they've taken great efforts to put in the floors and the walls and lighting.
Science has already overtaken fiction, 150 feet underground in a converted lime quarry in Kansas. In his subterranean complex, Dr. Roger Billings has brought the dream of a hydrogen-driven car to the brink of commercial reality. His laser cell first produces hydrogen gas from a couple of gallons of water, using electrolysis through dinner plate-sized discs of titanium, nickel and secret alloys. It can be done by plugging into the domestic power supply overnight, like trickle charging a battery.
The storage vessel on the world's first...
The gas is then fed into his second innovation, a storage hydride tank. This is filled with titanium and iron dust, which soaks up the hydrogen like a sponge and holds it safely. When the engine is switched on, the hydrogen is gently released from the hydride tank, goes back through the fuel cell to combine with oxygen from the air to produce water again. In the process, enough electricity is generated to power the electric motors to drive a car. The more discs in the fuel cell, the more power. The engine runs for 400 miles. Then it can either be recharged at home or boosted with hydrogen bought from filling stations, like petrol stations.
Here we are doing an experiment on our new laser cell.
The technology is now being brought to Europe by Dr. Billings' British associate, who wants British entrepreneurs to develop the first commercial engines and lay the base for what he says will be a huge new industry.
The fact that the inventor, who owns the patents, is willing to bring this technology to Britain in the earliest stages gives us an economic imperative to create the jobs in the industries here, rather than let them go to Germany or France or Japan or elsewhere. And I think that's exciting, and I think this country has a unique role to play in championing these new technologies. We've got the engineering, we've got the skilled labor force, we've got lower wage rates. I think we ought to make those work for us.
All sorts of fuels have been tried, towing a charcoal burner to provide the power.
The quest for the holy green grail of an engine like Dr. Billings, which produces just steam, has been pursued along some strange byways.
But here's something really powerful, a car that runs on poultry manure. Yes,
Like powering the family saloon with the gas from chicken droppings or on alcohol. None has proved viable. The main hope for pollution-free motoring is the electric vehicle. This is as far as we've got at the moment. Oh, there are prototype electric cars which can get from 0 to 60 in 8 seconds and top 100 miles an hour. But they need 32 conventional lead-acid batteries to do it, and they can only run for 100 miles before they need recharging. And the cost of recharging is greater than the cost of 100 miles worth of petrol. So what's the answer? Water. The hydrogen and oxygen which every school pupil learns make up water contain nearly 2.5 times the chemical energy of high-octane petrol.
Oxygen is gathered up at this end here and hydrogen at the other end over there.
But if we all burn water, what happens to the emperors of energy, the oil companies? Well, they say the hydrogen pretenders should stop burning the stuff and turn it into more profitable chemicals.
The growing world energy gap, oil can't keep up with that anyway. So Why not make better use of the resources we have and actually let oil be used for more important products, not so wasteful?
The fossil fuel industry is already watching the Kansas research with self-interest. For a start, hydrogen filling stations would be supplied by the natural gas industry. As for the car manufacturers, like Germany's BMW, they too are researching hydrogen engines. But they haven't overcome the major problem of carting around tanks of highly explosive liquid hydrogen at temperatures near absolute zero. The laser cell has cracked that problem. Now its promoters have to persuade British industry to bring the technology out of the laboratory and onto the mass market.
Well, I'm joined now by Professor Ian Fells of Newcastle University, who's an leading energy expert, and also by Sir Hal Miller, who's Conservative MP for Bromsgrove, and he himself comes from the heart of his constituency, is right in the heart of the car production country. So Hal, first, could this be the breakthrough we were waiting for?
Well, we don't know yet. What I'm aiming to do is to get a prototype vehicle over here. I understand it will be over here before the end of September. And in the meantime, the Dean of Engineering at London University will be evaluating the cell. What is certain is that we do need alternative fuels. What is also certain, at the moment the car companies are concentrating on methanol and other mixtures, but we need to think further out. I think what Dr. Billings, whom I've met and discussed this project with, is trying to do is to say, let's bring forward that 10 to 15 years to 5 years to 8 years. But there's still a lot of work to be done yet.
What makes you think this could be not just another of those endless inventions that falls aside?
No, because there are more people than Dr. Billings going after this. There's another man who's got another water fraction device which is currently being tested in London University, called Stan Meyer, and he's published a great deal. There are a lot of people researching this route, and that's the purpose of the Advanced Energy Research Institute, is to bring to this country the latest advances made elsewhere in the world and see whether they're capable of development and adoption here. But we're still in the testing phase. Let's run away with ourselves.
Ian Fells, from what you heard about Dr. Billings' car, do you think this could be the breakthrough?
Well, I'm a bit sceptical. I worked on fuel cells through the 1960s and early 1970s, and I've driven a car around on hydrogen in America, where the hydrogen was stored in this iron titanium solid, which Dr. Billings has talked about. But actually getting the whole thing put together, the actual technology of fuel cells, is jolly difficult. But we know they work because it was a fuel cell, a hydrogen-oxygen fuel cell, that put men on the moon with Project Apollo. It was the best way of doing it. So I hope he's right. It's just a curious way of going about things. That is, somehow we've learned about this from the newspapers. I haven't seen any proper papers or descriptions of it. I mean, I hesitate to say that it smacks a little of the curious cold fusion story. I think it's probably better than that. But we really do need a bit more evidence.
So Hal, be clear about this. You are hoping to bring this prototype to this country and have it studied in detail this autumn?
Yes, certainly. The car is already running.
Right.
It is being presented to the Pennsylvania State Department of Energy tomorrow, having driven there from Kansas. And I'm intent on getting it over here so that people like Professor Falls can make a full evaluation of it. There's nothing to hide about this. It's got to be tested. And the point, I think the breakthrough that Dr. Billings has made, and it was brought out in the film, people up to now have been talking in terms of carting hydrogen about, which is a jolly dangerous as well as expensive thing to do. What both Dr. Billings and Stan Meyer have done is to develop a way of releasing controlled amounts of hydrogen as required. And the secret lies not only in the cell, but in the control system and the subsequent adaptation of the fuel to propulsion. And compared with electricity, we saw the milk float. My understanding from Dr. Billings is that the improvement over the electric battery in the hydrogen cell is about a factor of 9. In other words, it could go 3 times as far at 3 times the speed.
And very briefly, the impact on your constituents, many of them car workers, if this
Well,
works?
of course, because the car is coming under economic pressure, and as well as the environmental considerations and the depletion of fossil fuels. So we have got to find alternative fuels. That's what the motor cars are doing. What this hydrogen story is about is, should we be bringing the hydrogen further into the foreground at the expense of methanol and other routes?
Hal Miller, Ian Fells, thank you both very much for joining us. Now, in a moment, trouble on the turf. Is racing being run in the right way? But first, the rest of today's news. The Employment Secretary, Michael Howard, is to publish a green paper on trade union reform before Parliament rises in July. The new proposals will deprive the TUC of its role as the arbiter of inter-union disputes and ensure that collective agreements will have legal force. Council workers in Liverpool have threatened to stop all burials and cremations from next week if the City Council fails to withdraw plans to sack nearly 300 of its workers. It's the latest development in a dispute which has left tons of rubbish uncollected in Liverpool. ITN's chief newscaster, Sir Alistair Burnett, is to take early retirement